Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have two separate aims for this video, which are probably incompatible, so I'm not sure how this will go off. One is that I want to just talk a little bit in generalizations about the creation of my new book and of the creation of a book of this sort. But also I want to read probably about a half hour's worth of material from the book. And I'm not sure how both of those things can be fit into a single video without it becoming absurdly long. So I think it must be 2 weeks now since this came out, or since this was done. The pages are curling. I must have damaged it. So it was on May 30th that the last poem was written, and I'm not sure where we are at now. Yeah, June 15th, so 2 weeks. And after I finished it, I finished the manuscript, the Microsoft Word work necessary to upload this to the self-publishing house. This is available at lulu.com, by the way. But I put it aside, and there were a couple of typos I had to correct immediately, but I put it aside. I really couldn't bear to get in touch with this again. And I find now, yesterday, I think, so basically after a 2-week period, I can look at it again. And I've noticed at least one minor typo that probably needs to be corrected, but I already filed away the manuscripts down in their hole in the basement, so I'm going to have to go back down and get them, which I'm putting off. I think the major errors have been fixed, and the minor ones I'm at a stage where I just sort of think, well, who cares? I am really grateful to the folks who were the early purchasers of this book, even though your copies may have one or two errors that I wish had been prevented. It's really hard when you're putting together a 400-page, 300-page manuscript to get rid of all of the errors. So this book is a compilation of poems which were written individually. So because of that, the strict sequence is not really important at all. They can be jumbled up, but it needs to be more or less in the order of composition, but it really does not matter. So I arranged the book so that things would fit on the page more equitably. And now I forget where I was going with that thought, pardon me. So even though the exact order of the poems is not critical, yet overall there has to be some sort of order to the progression. And so I don't know how much I can talk about that here. Now these poems they all are written in various types of formal verse. I think that's how people say that now. Poetry which is rhymed and metered, To me, it doesn't matter if a poem is rhymed or metered or if it is not. I don't see that there is any divergence between the methods. So you can have William Carlos Williams and Charles Bukowski on the one hand, and you can have, I don't know, Theodore Roethke on the other. And it's all poetry, and it doesn't really make a difference to the ultimate value to be derived from the thing, which style is in force in a particular poem. So this book was not originally started as a book, although I'm an old enough hand at this that the possibility of a book coming out of this was no doubt in the back of my mind. And in fact, it was suggested to me early on that I should consider doing a book of poems. That said, for a collection, there are more than 400 poems here. But while I was writing, I knew that I wanted to have the greatest breadth of form. So I wanted to use set stanza patterns. I wanted to use spur of the moment invented stanza patterns. A usual distinction would be made in a collection of poetry between, say, poems written in iambic pentameter and everything else. Usually they would not mix, but in my book, Small Poems, which was the precursor to this, I lumped it all together, and so I did here as well. And one of the poems that really surprised me, let's see if I can find this, but it winds up being something of a backbone to the work as it is structured, is the poem, let's see, poem from April 14th. Let's see if I can find it here. Which was done in a stanza form known as the Spenserian stanza, meaning it was invented by a poet named Spenser. And it was a long poem. I think it is 34 stanzas totally. And so when, now this comes at beyond the halfway point. So when it was done, I knew that it was going to be, as I said, a major structural element to the work as a whole. So while the poems themselves can very much be rearranged in their sequence, this poem, because it is bigger, it probably has to retain its position, and everything before it fall before it, and everything afterwards fall afterwards. And now so I said that was April 14th or April 15th is when the last two stanzas were written and it was finished. And within, I don't know, 5 days of that, I already had in my mind an idea of how the book would end, not substantively, not at all thematically, but in terms of structurally how it would end. And so I was thinking it was going to end with a iambic pentameter poem of some heft. And in fact, the muse gave me I don't know what it was, 3 lines or 4 lines. And it was something I put on the iPad, so I didn't have a physical handwritten thing because I would never have found them again, probably. And so what I did was I emailed it to myself. Now, when I got to the end, it was not certain that I was going to use those. And in fact, I tried other options before finally I settled on that. But ultimately, I did settle on those lines which the muse gave to me. So the muse knew better than I did, as is often the case. But it was only closing in upon the completion of the book that I realized that I wanted, and the book pretty much called for, that final poem to also be utilizing this stanza, the Spenserian stanza. Partly because when I wrote this one on April 15th, it was such a joy for me. It is a stanza form I had used before in a couple of my big books. If you go to the Lulu page, you will see the Resurgiad, terrible title, but that is done in that form. And it was just great fun to get back and do a little something. And then, for me, sort of the paragon for poetry written in that form is the great poem by John Keats, St. Agnes' Eve, or the Eve of St. Agnes. I can't remember the title. And that is a 42 stanza poem. And so I had 34, and I knew to make it into 42 stanzas, I would need 8 more. I think that's it. And so I knew, once I knew that that final poem should be in the Spenserian stanza, I knew that it should be a 72-line poem, as indeed it came out to be. Now, there is nothing in the immutable laws of the universe that said that final poem has to be 72 lines because it has to have 8 stanzas, because it has to form a completion that matches the stanza count of a poem by John Keats, which incidentally is the best thing we have in the language in Spenserian stanzas, at least post-Spenser himself. But when one writes, one must satisfy oneself as well as the muse. So the other consideration which I had in mind was, if I am trying to make then a unit of 42 stanzas, how can I satisfy both the demands of the book as a whole and the demands of a 42 stanza poem, with each of these parts wrenched out from the book and put together, say, in an anthology or something like that, because they naturally should lean together. And so that is the thing that I am not sure I succeeded in doing. As far as their place in the book, I am not worried about these stanzas, but as they sit together as a 42 stanza piece, I don't know if they work. And so I thought I would read them, and already I can see that the titles would have to go, or they would have to be divided with some kind of a Roman numeral, and that is fine. So the first is titled Spenserian Stanzas on a Gross Miscarriage of Justice, April 14, 2025. And I think to piece them together, that title probably would have to go, and it would have to be, I don't even know that you could just go Spenserian Stanzas on a Gross Miscarriage of Justice. I don't even know that that would work. So some other title would have to be. I mean, maybe you could just say Spenserian Stanzas, but that would perhaps be too generic. But so I thought I will read these stanzas and let you tell me if they lean up against one another. I mean, both parts of this, the initial 34 stanza part and then the concluding 8 stanza part. So I will just do that now. I should say, incidentally, that this is up at my Lulu site, and it already is outstripping anything else up at my Lulu site in terms of sales, and that is because very generously friends of mine in the BookTube community have purchased the book, and a couple of folks have also showcased it, and I must just say how grateful I am for all of this kind of support. Now, I realize that the interest to a book like this comes from its topicality. My first 5 books were published under the imprint of Non-Fit Press, and back at that time I was out hustling. I was going to poetry fairs and festivals. I would have a table. I would sell my things. I was often the featured reader here or there. I say often, not really often, but occasionally. And throughout that whole time, you can't really see the title that well, but Against Holy War was my outstanding seller. Not that my stuff, even now, is outstanding. I sell little bits here and there. But this was also very much a topically relevant book in that it addressed specifically the aftermath of the events on September 11th, 2001. They are both curiously against books. So Against Holy War and Against Fascism. So I'm going to read both parts which are in the Spenserian stanza, and then we'll see if I feel like talking more afterwards. I will possibly put timestamps into the description box if it seems necessary to do so. Than liberty, what could there be more precious? April 14th, 2025 will be remarked a day when winds capricious in strange concatenation did contrive a people of its freedom to deprive that had existed in its form ideal and for 250 years survive, or nearly so. Its universal appeal promulged to living hearts where people think and feel. America, or the United States, as she was wont to style herself, endured amid discordant struggles, diverse fates in raucous conflict, injuries not cured, to which complacent hearts became inured, while others, more inspired, sought to extend the reach of her democracy, immured today because a long malevolent trend was sped by malefactors working for its end. 2 centuries and 1/2, but 1 year, survived the proud republic, if too proud. If you can keep it, words not meant a sneer, but to give warning of the fickle crowd into whose hands possession was endowed, by men enthralled with constitutional law in prospect, even as the fields were plowed over terrain where Indian man and squaw flourished and eked, the white terms rude and raw. The interloping colonist whole cloth created both a lush and barren land in his imagination, ripe for growth, for cultivation, and for order planned on European model, then set hand to building what he visioned, while he cleared the untamed landscape destined to expand, native inhabitants in mind meld weird, he called invisible, yet savages to be feared. Theirs was compounded by a trail of tears extending crossed the wide Atlantic Ocean, while lives were sacrificed to buccaneers, soldiers of fortune, zealous in devotion to vast conglomerate wealth in its promotion, imprimatur officially sanctioned then, bolstered by a unique and curious notion that paragon and highest specimen of humankind indwelt in the white men, whereby a gruesome hierarchy of skin was built upon the backs of the exploited, impressment as deserved through melanin, themselves as living gods almost anointed, megalomaniacs yet disappointed when the impressed refused to share that view, as led the colonist to grow disjointed, deranged in mind, as he in secret knew the implications of what he could not eschew. Upon plantation complex in the South, both men and women took charge of their slaves, for labor and for sexual purpose both, committing their own secrets to their graves, occluded in the literature. Yet time saves sufficient evidence and ample hint of sins historic, guilt which nothing waives, despite all euphemisms man can mint, and obfuscations as but barely last a stint. The racial domination of the world grew to be seen as it were destiny manifested, a great banner unfurled, proclaiming all the white man's property, his land, America, from sea to sea, even as through domains both vast and various, incursions spread centrifugally. So he, white colonizer, even deeds nefarious, excused himself, his hold tenuous, precarious. Yet the magnificent words of Jefferson rang with true promise no one could deny. Though the attempt was made and undone successively, both hope and infamy commingling and conflicting by and by, through war and litigation, bit by bit. Pieces were disassembled. People try to forge a just world on the bed of it. In common aspiration, no one seemed to quit. Until this day, the various different factions strove mightily to keep the Union sound. Yet many sought a history of redactions, as only told the story to confound, with gaps for filling, until men felt drowned under a sea of loud cacophonies of meanings lost, and truths that did astound when bursting on the ear. As panics seize, breath quickens, some get mad, while some drop to their knees. Mid the discordant noises of the day, keep us from falling, Heavenly Lord. There grew a faction in the land that strove to slay the better spirit of those words they knew, such words proclaiming on their best review, all as created equal. Sown discord, willful, impassioned, devious through and through, strove hard to sunder, as though by a sword, justice for all as had been promised by the word. The nation had become a beacon for many who sought to make their own escape from cruel dictatorships or crueler war, as drawn unto the image taken shape from their ideals reflected. Though a drape may cover yet a rancid underbelly, America's broad promise seemed to gape, scent odoriferous, not ever smelly, of dreams, till men appeared to ransack them pell-mell. Much like the early colonizers, these men surreptitiously concealed their plan beneath a veil of lies, while jokes appease the rudely inattentive. So each man, after indoctrination, soon began to blame imagined troubles on some other, no less a figment than presented an unbaptized child unto a Catholic brother, first sacrament high prized, albeit one's life smother. Soon there arose amongst this stubborn lot a figure diabolical, almost an antichrist in nature, who begot upon his followers, although it cost of spirit, a schematic that engrossed their vital energies in cult-like manner. Even as they the Christian spirit lost, they held his name upon their belligerent banner, a fact not lost upon even the casual scanner. He led them on to hatred, shunning love, supremacy while shunned humility, even as founding precepts did remove each one from cogitation. Thereby he inculcated a normal blasphemy, but labeled it a Christian kind of greatness, greatness a chimera for all to see, and ginned them up to an extreme irateness, whereby all rectitude they viewed as an ornateness. Time slipping fast as sands through hourglass slip, their common decency mostly revoked. He and his cronies plant dictatorship, sight all confused, seen well mirrored and smoked, even as Eleutheria is choked, goddess of liberty. Her hopeful reign even subsided while the killers joked, and many fell beside in grief and pain because they knew she would not likely come again. He raised their ire against the foreigners sojourning in the land most peaceably, though in his slanders he portrayed them worse as almost maniacs of villainy, and counseled them, his followers, to be complacent with injustices to them, good people worth their hospitality. His followers were swayed by stratagem, with hate encouraged most foreigners to condemn. Yet mostly centering his vituperative hate on persons classed outside the rubric white, persons as bearing in the aggregate descent from outside Europe. This despite genetics which confirms all people quite congruous in their makeup, race so-called, a false distinction made so as to smite victims of exploitation, a lie bald, an ignominious shame demanding to be stalled. 300 men he had police detain, claiming them criminals, though they were not. Rushing to judgment, his haste did proclaim itself through wartime measures, though a lot of self-conditioning first prepared the pot in which the wicked stew was evilly brewed. As each who saw became Iscariot, Judas to Jesus Christ, except he hewed unto no party line, refusing to collude. One was a hairdresser, a kindly lad. One bore a small tattoo about autism because he loved his brother. None were bad of all 300, seen through any prism, or none demonstrably so, but tribalism with hate stopped clear assessment of the facts, legal proceedings squelched, as though a schism set them apart from both norms and compacts, as underwrite society and truth retracts. These men were innocent of proven crime, yet sentenced to a torture prison distant, duration set to last a whole lifetime, even though virtue made itself insistent, for like some engine foul and furiously pistoned, the prison a machine demanded men, belching its fire, and who could be resistant? Not foreigner nor birthright citizen, equally subject to hell in that devil's den. The autocrat, dictator as he was, worked hard to make his subjects feel afraid. Subjects they were, but not by any laws, but being through their complicity so made. And soon enough, as each to each betrayed, not one was left as could be classed as free. All rights and norms and laws consigned to shade of deepening obscurantism. Thus we observe complete eclipse, devour democracy. The torture prison, a concentration camp as variously described, was built to house vast servile multitudes and bore the stamp of cruelty in each facet, to arouse pity and fury, but few come to browse, for like a black hole, no light gets emitted, and word or in or out no God allows, while such as are to that frame ungodly fitted, only with death does any come to be acquitted. The ill intentions of the foul regime made manifest in taking the 300, consigning them to nightmare sans hope's gleam, were shown by lives domestic that they plundered, as folks confused, insensate, dumbly wondered wherein had lain the acrimonious fault. The prisoners, all from their loved ones sundered, let us not dwell on them. Too difficult the loves they left behind, sans means to catapult. Turn we attention to another man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, among the rest, included in the heinous prison plan. Clerical error rudely did divest him of the wife he formerly caressed, the children whom he bounced upon his knee. So to be with the other men oppressed, different in that he had stayed legally, nor fiction could there be to claim this man unfree. His decade of residence was, furthermore, under protection of the court, because enemies he'd left in El Salvador carried their grudges. But, alas, the law's rescript availed him nothing, not a pause, even to stem his foul, fateful rendition, though innocent, into the jackal's maws. The men were briefly put on exhibition, manhandled, bludgeoned, then whisked off to their perdition. The highest court declared he must be freed, yet contravening constitutional law, the would-be autocrat refused to heed. Meanwhile, his minions held him in their awe, obese, stupid, and mean, rapacious, raw, in his desire and in his vanity. So never did his heart begin to thaw, as he was born unknowing sympathy, a child of wealth, and in cruelty a prodigy. The prison known as Sikat holds renown for its unrivaled cruelty and its boast that never walked man free who was sent down into its bowels. Each man becomes a ghost who enters its domain and outcast post. Built in El Salvador to house the worst, supposedly, it stands stark as a host devoid of mercy. Men therein immersed, even who pay for crimes, have been immensely cursed. As President of the United States, declared the would-be autocrat, I have zero authority behind the gates of Sikat prison, even though I gave millions of dollars so that it might pave a smooth transition for these men I sent. Kilmar Abrego Garcia has to brave conditions as he finds them. We assent, acknowledge that he is completely innocent. However, I have no authority to make negotiation for a man held upon foreign soil. He should be free, but there is very little that I can, almost as though prevented by a ban, and I respect the sovereignty of others. Even if he had been American, I could not help him if I had my druthers. There he will stay with other sons of other mothers. Previously, 3 weeks before, he had pressured a sovereign nation to release the brothers Tate, 2 men affirmed as bad, arraigned on charges there for villainies of various sorts, and few can match with these: sex trafficking of women and of minors, various rapes, sexual indecencies involving force. He paid for the jetliner's transport upon the brothers' release by their confiners. He called the Salvadorian president to hold with him in Washington, D.C., a televised press conference, which they spent reiterating individually respective lack of power to set him free, a man both had colluded in detaining. But though in helplessness they both agree, their bluster lacked some luster in explaining, despite the Stonewall front that they combined maintaining. Donald Trump strolled aside to Stephen Miller, his aide-de-camp and immigrant abhorrer, and asked, "Has the High Court been the fulfiller of sacred duty? You are the restorer of greatness in America, your aura set now to be a beacon for all ages." Miller replied, "The cruel monster's adorer, though spoken words subvert the written pages, which had told opposite. This infamy presages." Trump rolled back to the side of President Nayib Bukele, Marco Rubio's friend, El Salvadorian ruler, speaking anent great plans ambitious he might not suspend. "I need 5 prisons built, for I intend to send more persons to El Salvador, citizens even, whom I long to send, to languish miserably forevermore on your land's soil, as mine to greatness I restore." Two. Dear Lord, it had been well prognosticated that when my country, the United States, aligned itself with devils, it was fated to suffer shocks as do attend on hates, even as long time history relates, and many racks occur as have to jar all persons from complacency. So fate's caprices all and sundry mock and mar, and we must recognize ourselves for what we are. So now it seems, careening as through space we reach the end of some trajectory, so long propelling us upon the race, though why we acted so we could not see. Men's wishes are enacted wantonly, and we, disdainful of just, true, and good, have flown off as upon a spending spree when our account lies bankrupt, and we should rather make an accounting on what ground we've stood. These Donald Trumps and Stephen Millers may indeed be small-time players upon time's stage, yet even so, the harms they wreak today release their repercussions for an age, propounded soon on multitudinous page as scholars of the future mull and study. How did the people give in to mad rage? How did the clear, correct path turn so muddy, even as discontent spilled over and grew bloody? Kilmar Abrego and Khalil Mahmoud became the early victims of regime, even as mob in moral desuetude cheered on the crimes increasingly extreme. It showed the world is not what it did seem in fanciful imaginings, ourselves pretending no disprobities dare teem within the heart, when there a devil delves, even as we begin policing library shelves. The book of man is various and writ large, without the need of any fascist hand to put the steering rudder in his charge, belonging to another. Men have planned iniquitous schemes because their dreams expand, only to reap the greater disappointment. Again, let us review whereon we stand, for none greatness attain through self-anointment. Blessed be he who, Christ-like, brings love's healing ointment. The rancorous rage and violence stirred up by such self-serving malefactors must dash rather than conserve the brimming cup of bounteous joy which is the human trust. Let others live as they might choose, for dust awaits us with the passage of brief time. Do unto others that which would be just, though friend or stranger. Sanction never crime, nor with loquacious words misdeeds make seem sublime. Heavenly Lord, I will not pledge allegiance to such a rulership as scrambles now for paramountcy over vasty regions, beyond what equity may right allow. Indeed, against the fascist might I vow to raise my shield of kindness and compassion, to be not cowed, nor either to kowtow, though it ubiquitous appears the fashion, but valorously fight, although the end be ashen. How profiteth a man to gain the world, but lose his soul? A question aptly asked. Even as men with great designs unfurled through flags and slogans view themselves as tasked to press their will upon the world, though masked malicious in intent or good portending. Ambitions such as incubate unflasked, wreak havoc on the world, so without ending, while I would have my way with that of justice blending. So you tell me if the 42 stanzas work together as a comprehensive whole. It's really the question I've been curious about. So I should add, I've done other videos. I have one about Keats in which I talk about my first experience reading John Keats' The Eve of St. Agnes, and how I got halfway through and fell back exhausted. The next day I took it up again and read the poem the whole way through. So that was 42 stanzas. And so do not fault yourself if you find this, even just hearing this, exhausting. Something such as this takes time to build yourself up to. So that the majority of the book is these little poems, and I recommend that it be read just in little bits and pieces. Read a poem here, there, in and out, not trying to read the whole thing, and certainly not forcing oneself to tackle one of these longer poems in iambic pentameter, especially the 34 stanzas in the 34 stanzas in the Spenserian form. Definitely don't attempt that, or just attempt however much one can. It's not easy. I mean, you have to work, as I say, to get there. And so you may not be able to answer to me whether these 42 stanzas work together or not. And I should add that the first 34 were written and conceived as a complete unit unto themselves. And then the last 8 were also conceived as a complete unit unto themselves. So I was trying to accomplish several things. Let each stand alone without any issues. Let each combine, and so into a 42 stanza poem that stands alone comprehensively without any issues, and then each poem to take its place within the arc of the book itself and fulfill the greater conditions required of the book. So I know this was sort of hard. The stanza, I think, take about a half hour, so there's also 20 minutes talking. And while I was reading that, I came across errors that I don't think I corrected yet, so I will have to do something. I have Kilmar Abrego Garcia holding the boy on his knee, except when I read it this time, the word said keen. And so it kind of threw me. And so I have to go and just double check this stuff. I don't remember correcting that. So if you've bought this book, you probably have it wrong. I really apologize for all of this. It's hard, especially coming off of the 3-month period of writing, to then try to put the manuscript into form. And it is best, or would be best, to have a publishing house with a host of paid proofreaders to help one out. And I have, somebody has kindly volunteered to help me with that. And I think I've pretty much covered all of the major things. As I say, keen for knee, that, and a lot of these mistakes are things specifically that the autocorrect changed on me, unfortunately. But I think if you are reading the book, you are likely to understand that him holding the boy or whatever it was on the knee was meant, and not holding the child on the keen. Oh, Lord. So, sorry, reading that stuff is tiresome. It doesn't matter if I'm the one who wrote it or somebody else. So I will leave off here, and if you feel like giving me a little feedback, that's great, but by no means feel obliged. Thank you for stopping by my channel.